Tonight on Brian Ross Investigates, inmates and their families in a panic over a health crisis at this federal women's prison in Florida.
Inmates are living in what this lawsuit calls, quote, an emergency crisis.
Inmates telling us the Bureau of Prisons is covering up a serious outbreak of Legionnaire's disease, a potentially deadly respiratory illness caused by contaminated water.
There just seems to be a willful neglect and depraved indifference that exists specifically at this facility.
Plus, the brothers from Brazil. Two brothers linked to a massive corruption scheme and their U.S. companies now receiving $100 million in U.S. taxpayer money meant for American farmers and ranchers.
The Batista brothers, the leading shareholders, have admitted to criminal acts, numerous criminal acts.
And our shout out for the reporter taking on state officials who he says have been purging hundreds of thousands of mostly black and young voters from the eligible voter rolls.
Sir, why do we have to sue you to get the names of voters who've been removed?
From the Law&Crime Network studios in New York City's Herald Square, this is Brian Ross Investigates. Good evening and welcome. As the world waits with dread for the latest on that deadly virus out of China, we're going to focus tonight on another outbreak, one that many say has not received the kind of urgent attention it needs. This is Camp Coleman, a women's federal prison in Florida, just north of Tampa, a place where an outbreak of Legionnaire's disease has the inmates and their families up in arms.
Inmates are living in what this lawsuit calls, quote, an emergency crisis. This comes after a Legionnaire's disease outbreak in the facility in January.
Legionnaire's disease is a severe respiratory illness caused by inhaling small particles of contaminated water. The government now admits at least 2 confirmed cases and at least 21 suspected cases. One of the prisoners here told me by phone that she and others are not being well taken care of.
I had such a terrible cough that she gave me some breathing treatments for 2 days, but I was never seen by a doctor or had any tests performed on me. I was never called back to see a doctor. Others continued to go. People were fighting tooth and nail to go. And nobody was really being seen. Their response to say it lacked would be an understatement. Most people were told purchase over-the-counter meds on commissary. That, I believe, was pretty much the standard of care.
You had to buy your own medicine.
Yes, we had to buy our own medicine. That is correct. That is often what happens here.
The women were so outraged that one of them, Kara Adams, actually filed a class action lawsuit against the Attorney General, William Barr, and the head of the Federal Bureau of Prisons.
This is my 3rd camp, and by far the health care here is the worst. It is not good throughout the Bureau, I would like to add, but there just seems to be a willful neglect and depraved indifference that exists specifically at this facility.
In response to the lawsuit, the government says all cases, both confirmed and suspect, have been and are currently being treated, and that all testing by the Florida Department of Health returned negative results for the Legionella bacteria.
I think that we all know that that's just not really possible.
And they say they've tested almost everybody and the problem is taken care of.
That's false. They haven't tested. Like, again, if they have tested 20% of the inmate population, that would be shocking to me.
We're joined now by Helen Pedlin, whose daughter was at the Coleman facility until being moved last week, and by Mark Brodeur, whose wife Karen is one of the inmates at the Coleman prison in Florida. And Mark, let me start with you. What's the latest you hear there from your wife in the facility?
Well, I mean, I have to echo what was just said. We're getting very little information from anyone at the facility other than our campers. We are being told that people are being tested, or we're reading that people are being tested, but the people inside are obviously not being tested. There's more reports of people doing everything they can to go to medical, to continue to fight to ask for testing and being refused.
And Helen, let me ask you, how sick was your daughter?
She was in F3, so she wasn't really all that sick, but she couldn't breathe. She had a headache, constant headache. Every day she had a headache. She had congestion, didn't feel like getting up and going to work, but did anyway. Begged for medical to see her. Never happened.
So she did not get the attention she thought she needed?
No, sir, not at all. None of them are.
Okay, Mark, a question for you from our control room from executive producer Rhonda Schwartz. Rhonda?
Mark, are
Yes,
the women, there's men and women in this facility, are the women not getting the same kind of attention?
Well, the women's camp is a separate facility from the men's, so they're in their own living quarters. And we don't know what's going on with the men's. There's been rumors that people have tested positive there, but they're only rumors at this point. We have no way to confirm any of that.
And Mark, let me ask you, and Helen as well, it's rather remarkable for the inmates to go to court. One of them is suing, others are speaking out publicly. Do they face possible retaliation for trying to blow the whistle on the prison warden and the officials?
I feel like they're retaliating in little bitty ways, you know, just to being mean to them and refusing the medical, the way they talk to them.
And Mark, how about you? What do you think? Is it dangerous times for these women to be speaking out like this, going public with their complaints?
Well, there's certainly hesitation for people to speak up. The ones that are speaking up are worried about retaliation. There's different things I've heard about of people working at the facility that are trying to feed information to the campers and trying to offer assistance where they can. There seems to be infighting with some of the medical staff we've been hearing of, where some people are trying to get medical help and trying to give medical help, and then others would come in and refuse it. And again, we're getting this all from our loved ones inside.
And they are convinced the prison officials are not telling the whole story of what's going on there?
Oh, fully. I mean, there's been little information that's come out, if any at all. And the information, the response that we've received from the BOP and the response from the lawsuit that was issued pretty much denied that there was any issue there at all. And that everyone's been tested and there's been no Legionella found on the facility. But if there isn't, someone has to explain how all these women are sick, how they all have symptoms that are similar, and what they're doing to solve that problem.
So this must be a very tense time for you and for Helen with your loved ones in there, in the facility, and you don't know what's going to happen next?
No, my daughter was transferred out last week.
Right.
She still has a headache. She still has congestion. She's supposed to get tested where she is, but everybody in there, I'm sure, has it.
All right.
And they're not staying.
Helen Penland, Mark Broder, thank you so much for joining us. Keep us posted on the list. We'll continue to be in touch with you. We asked the Bureau of Prisons to provide someone to appear on our program tonight, but so far they've declined to do so. The offer is still open. Up next, the brothers from Brazil. Why has $100 million in U.S. taxpayer money gone to companies owned by two brothers from Brazil connected to a serious criminal investigation? Next, the brothers from Brazil. We've been following the case of two brothers linked to a huge corruption scandal in Brazil who have been buying up American meatpacking companies, which it now turns out have received some $100 million in U.S. taxpayer money, subsidies meant for American farmers and ranchers. Now members of Congress want to know what's going on. From its highly produced corporate promotional videos, the JBS company appears to be a great success, built on hard work and a commitment to corporate responsibility. Started decades ago by a small-time butcher in Brazil, it has now grown into a multi-billion-dollar worldwide beef, poultry, and pork producer, the largest in the world, saying it provides the world with quality food. And it has now bought up some of America's best-known brands. But what the company's videos don't mention is the scandal-plagued background, big news in Brazil, of the two brothers who run the company, Josley and Wesley Batista, sons of the founder. Connected to a massive bribery scheme in Brazil, that allegedly helped them get the money to buy up the American companies. Brazilian TV showing hidden camera footage of the brothers supposedly making backroom deals.
JBS is currently under investigation by the Department of Justice for potential violations of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. This is because the Batista brothers, the leading shareholders, have admitted to criminal acts, numerous criminal acts, consisting of the bribery of thousands of Brazilian government officials to obtain illicit loans from Brazil's national bank. The ill-gotten loans were then used by JBS to illegally enter and consolidate the meatpacking industry in the United States.
Questions about the company came into a sharper focus when it was revealed the company had received tens of millions of dollars in U.S. taxpayer money that President Trump said was meant to help American farmers hit hard by the trade war with China.
So we will ensure that our farmers get the relief they need, and very, very quickly. It's a good time to be a farmer. We're going to make sure of that.
JBS has received a little over $100 million in payments. That money, I might add, was supposed to have been for struggling farmers, ranchers who have been hurt by the administration's failed trade policies.
In a statement to Brian Ross Investigates, the company said it has, quote, fully cooperated with all relevant authorities in a transparent manner regarding past events, unquote. And it says it is an important American employer, providing more than 60,000 jobs and partnering with more than 11,000 farmers, ranchers, and poultry producers. But its critics say that doesn't change the facts of its illicit behavior. So you're saying this is a corrupt company and these are the fruits of a poison tree, really?
These are the fruits of a poison tree. That's exactly right, Ryan. And no one should be able to profit from ill-gotten gain. Not in the United States. You may get away with that in Brazil or in other countries, but you should not get away with that in the United States. Farmers and ranchers are being harmed, consumers are being deceived, and it's all been brought about because of the illegal activity that was conducted in Brazil.
Joining us now for more on this is Angela Huffman. She's the executive director of a group that represents 250,000 individual farmers and ranchers called the Organization for Competitive Markets. And Angela, thanks for being with us tonight. Tell me, is the upset that you have about this situation because the brothers have this background with corruption in Brazil, or because corporations are getting all this money?
Well, the USDA has promoted this program to taxpayers as a bailout for America's farmers. Yet a Brazilian corporation is of those funds. It's not fair to our taxpayers nor our farmers.
But the fact is, all corporations are eligible for this money. Then the company told us they have to sort of get the money to be part of the program to provide food and be part of the market here.
Mm-hmm. That's right. But the fact is, JBS is a criminal organization with a corporate facade. And this isn't the food system that American taxpayers want, yet we're being forced to subsidize it in the name of farmer bailouts.
And there are also questions that are being raised in Congress about the safety record of this company.
That's right. In 2017, JBS was involved in bribing Brazilian meat inspectors, allowing them to sell and export rotten meat around the world, including here in the U.S.
And how has it been they've been able to buy up so many meatpacking big names we know here?
Mm-hmm. Well, through these taxpayer bailouts, JBS has profited on the trade war with China. They announced back in August that they were at their best point in the company's history for global expansion, and they're just gobbling up meatpacking companies all around the world.
So the trade war with China has helped them because they continue to make more profits and they're getting the subsidies as well?
That's right. Yep. While Chinese ports were shut down to U.S. products as a result of the trade war, JBS started shipping in products from its Brazilian facilities. And in the meantime, the U.S. funneled $100 million into JBS in the name of U.S. farmer bailouts.
Now, the company told us they think they're being unfairly targeted by a lobbying campaign connected to a financial deal that really has nothing to do with this issue. Is that something you know about?
That's not something we know about. We represent farmers and ranchers who are really upset about the results of this program.
And how do the farmers and ranchers, what do they say to you about this program and how it works?
Well, they're struggling. JBS admitted back in 2018 to cheating America's farmers and ranchers by paying them less than the real value for their cattle at 3 separate beef processing plants. We've gotten a lot of calls about that. People are really upset. We should be investigating JBS, fining JBS, not giving them taxpayer bailouts.
And it appears there are some investigations now underway, according to the Congresswoman.
There are. U.S. Department of Justice and the Securities Exchange Commission are investigating JBS. We're disappointed in the USDA and Secretary Perdue. Just last week, Perdue let Congresswoman DeLauro know that he was declining to investigate and not putting the bailout money on hold in the meantime. Just last week, the U.S. Government Accountability Office announced it's opening a review of the bailout as well. So we are making progress, but disappointed in USDA.
Angela Huffman, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
Up next, our shout out, the reporter taking on local officials who he says have been purging thousands of people from the voter rolls when we come back. Our shout out tonight for a reporter who has his own investigative fund and has been working with the Georgia Coalition for the People's Agenda to produce a powerful lawsuit and some powerful stories. Palace's investigation really took off when he discovered that this elderly woman, Christine Jordan, was turned away from voting on Election Day in Atlanta. Her name purged from the voting rolls in Georgia, supposedly because she had moved.
Has this ever happened to you before?
Never.
How long have you been voting?
All my life, ever since I was old enough. But I've been voting right here ever since 1968.
Miss Jordan was not just anyone.
She's the 92-year-old cousin of Martin Luther King Jr. She was thrown out of the polling station because they said she had moved. She's been in the same house for over 50 years, and she was the host of Martin Luther King after he would give his sermons at the Ebenezer Baptist Church. She hasn't moved anywhere, but they threw her out for moving.
Miss Jordan's granddaughter told Palace no one could explain how her name was taken off the eligible voter list.
And it's horrible. And I say that because the West End, she's been in this community back when they were doing sit-ins. She held civil rights meetings in her home. And today to come out and not be able to vote and no one can give you an explanation, like, it's extremely emotional and it bothers me. It bothers me to my core. Like, there's actually no record of her whatsoever voting in any election whatsoever, and it's ridiculous.
Palace discovered what was going on at the Secretary of State's office in the Georgia Capitol and elsewhere.
For 6 years, I've been hunting down these secretaries of state, the people in charge of our voter rolls, who've been playing games by removing voters of color from the voter rolls.
In Georgia, it was Secretary of State Brian Kemp who was running for governor of the state.
I'm Brian Kemp. If you want a politically incorrect conservative, that's me.
I demanded that he give me all the information on the people he'd been removing from the voter rolls. The names, addresses. He said hundreds of thousands of people, almost 500,000, had moved out of Georgia in 2 years.
And then he confronted Kemp about what was going on.
Mr. Kemp, are you removing black voters from the voter rolls just so you can win this election? Why aren't you answering my questions? Sir, why do we have to sue you to get the names of voters who've been removed?
So when he stonewalled me on his lists of people he removed, I did something that is rarely done. I actually filed a federal lawsuit under the National Voter Registration Act, which said you have to hand over your files because it's about manipulating the voter rolls. A judge ordered Brian Kemp to open up his files on the voters he'd removed, how he removes them.
All backed by the Palace Investigative Fund.
We have an expert team that's pretty hard to match anywhere. It's very expensive, very difficult. What I've been able to accomplish with this lawsuit is not only opening up the files of these officials who are secretly playing games with the voter rolls, I'm opening up for every investigative reporter and reporting team. I've gotten calls from many, many papers and many outlets for this information.
Voter fraud is all too common.
President Trump made much of alleged voter fraud in this country, people voting twice, when he appointed the Secretary of State from Kansas, Chris Kobach, to head up a special investigative commission, which has yet to turn up any evidence of widespread voting fraud.
We want to make America great again. We have to protect the integrity of the vote and our voters.
When Trump said that there's massive vote rigging, I think he's right. But it's the cronies behind him who've been the center of the vote rigging.
And Pella says that Kansas Secretary of State is one of the culprits, sending other states cross-check lists of common names, alleging they have registered twice.
Mr. Kobach? Hi. Hey, I want to congratulate you. You are the #1 fraudulent voter hunter in the United States.
Thank you very much.
You're the guy behind the cross-check list. The title on this list is duplicate voters, okay? So wait, I've noticed, most of the names are, you've said that there is a massive problem with double voters. You've given out this list.
These are not double voters.
This is the list. You say it's potential double voters.
No.
Fowler says he hopes other reporters in the U.S. will pick up now on what he has been doing.
It's not my job to elect or stop a theft of an election or do anything, that's not my job. My job is to expose this material. This is part of a national program to remove voters of color before the 2020 election. Now, this isn't about Democrats or Republicans. It's about right and wrong. It's about whether we're going to use a kind of new Jim Crow trickery to remove voters of color and young people from the voter rolls. Well, I got to tell you that being an investigative reporter is a lot better than working for a living.
That's our program for tonight. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you back here next week.